What can I do for you folks today?
Can you clarify on a lot of this Olympic confusion as to whether we're having a plebiscite, whether the province requires a plebiscite? Tell us what's really happening.
Sure, I can do that. There were ongoing conversations with the provincial and federal government up to the evening of last Wednesday, when finally everyone agreed on their own conditions and agreed that they would be making an announcement on Thursday, and Council was informed first thing Thursday that this was happening later in the day. Now, one of those conditions was that the province had suggested that they would require a plebiscite going forward. Now, I know it's a bit confusing. The letter that the minister sent me indicated that that was a condition for the first funding of the BidCo. They're now saying it's a condition for further funding. It's a distinction without a difference, frankly. They put that condition in place.
What do you say to on the black card issue? Looking at it again in the sense of there was an understanding that one would cancel out the other. The black card fee would sort of be canceled out by some sort of a tax cut, and now we have this memo saying that's probably not the case.
I tried to be clear about this on the day that we had the debate, and I'm not sure anyone was listening, so let me try again. Right now, because it's covered by property taxes, it's covered by both individuals or homeowners and business property taxes. Now, the businesses, of course, don't get that service. They pay for it on their own. So moving it to a direct user fee means the businesses are no longer subsidizing that service. So that's number one. That's why because about 50% of property taxes come from business, that means the businesses are receiving the rest of that return. So yes, all of the money is being returned to taxpayers, but half of it is going to business taxpayers and only half to property taxpayers. But the property taxpayers now have to pay for 100% of that service because that's what they're using. So that's where the confusion has come. The other area is that right now, if your house is worth more, you pay more in property taxes. So some people are paying more, quote unquote, for this service than others. And I raised that as well at Council, that if Council moves this to a pure user fee system and everyone pays exactly the same, then you lose that redistributive effect as well.
Which means real people talk. In non-economics talk.
It basically means that people with more expensive houses will get a slightly, I mean, we're not talking about big dollars here, but people with more expensive houses will get a slightly bigger reduction than people with less expensive houses.
Just to go back on the Olympics discussion.
Do we really have to?
Yes.
Any more questions?
I want to talk about cannabis, huh?
We'll definitely talk about that as well, but I just want to go back. You said before, with regards to the plebiscite, that it's basically a distinction without a difference. So, and things got a little bit heated this morning between yourself and a few councillors. So, is it basically the message that regardless if it's the condition is on beyond the plebiscite, clearly if we're going to have funding for an actual hosting the Olympics, which is going to be way more than the money that has been discussed so far, we need to have a plebiscite. So let's just be perfectly clear here, so there's more confusion going forward. Regardless of the BidCo here, we're going to have one.
If the province has suggested that they would not fund the Olympics without a plebiscite.
And therefore the decision on April 10th will be have a plebiscite
or not,
and continue pursuing the Olympics, or no plebiscite and no provincial funding.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, presumably there may be a path forward that looks at Olympics that doesn't require any provincial funding. That's hard for me to imagine.
Should the province pay for Calgary's plebiscite if that's the province's condition?
I think so. If it's your condition, you should put money on the table.
But how would that work? Because Laura Kennedy told us last week that the money coming to her would have to come from the city.
Yeah, but there are ways around that. The province could give us a grant, right? So,
and the minister has said that you are working on it at some level as to who's going to pay for it.
Yeah,
so maybe he's willing to.
I've been very clear about this for a long time. I'm not at all opposed to a plebiscite. However, I do think that we have to figure out how to pay for it, and the party requesting it should pay for it. That the timing has to make sense so that citizens have enough information to make an informed decision, but we haven't wasted a lot of time and money on stuff that would be irrelevant if the plebiscite answer was no, and that the timing has to work in the overall bid timing. I think all of that is possible, and that's what we'll discuss on April 10th.
So is there anything actually new revealed today on the Olympic story?
No. That's why I'm a bit surprised about the whole conversation. I mean, there is this strange thing about what was the province attaching the condition to. I have a letter saying it was attached to the BidCo money. I understand the Premier's press secretary or director of communications is now saying it's attached to the further money. It doesn't matter. It's a condition.
Is that
That's the only thing
frustrating this
that's
far along in the process, though, to have those miscommunications?
Oh yes, of course. I mean, yes, it is. In this job, things move fast. And I understand that some members of council get frustrated sometimes when things are moving so quickly. But it's incumbent on all of us to make sure that when we're dealing with this stuff, we're on top of what's going on. And I think that's clear. You know, we had some members of council saying they only learned about this on social media, which basically means they haven't been going to or paying attention at the multiple briefings they've had. There have been so many briefings about what was happening, nor to the communication that they received prior to any public announcement being made. So that said, it is still a bit frustrating because particularly this condition was added in by the province, and it's clear from their own communications that they themselves were not entirely clear on what they wanted. Hopefully that clarity that Ms. Oates has provided today will help.
And what are the conditions on a plebiscite, though? If you have a low turnout that shows 52% support, what do you take?
I've asked many of these questions because, again, those are good questions for the people who are insisting on the plebiscite.
Who on the city side has agreed to these conditions?
Nobody has agreed to anything. This is the key issue.
Right.
Nobody has agreed to anything. It's their condition, and council gets to focus on that on April 10th.
They get to agree with it if they so wish.
Exactly.
Where does that confusion come from then?
Don't know. I mean, I understand that Minister Miranda said that there was some consensus reached. That's just not the case. It's their condition.
Right, but before the feds in the province came out with this announcement on Thursday, somebody at the city must have said, yeah, okay, we're cool with this. Let's
Oh, I wish I had that power. If I had the power to tell the feds in the province what conditions they put on our funding, I'd be a much happier man.
But
no, of course, the city does not have that power.
No, but it sounded like
they have the
that
power to
said-
put their own conditions on whatever funding they want, and they do it all the time.
Right, unless we were all confused here. It sounded like Brad Stevens suggested that that decision was made by elected officials.
He did not say that.
What was he saying that he was referring to elected officials?
He said that we knew what was coming, because obviously you have to have these conversations, but that no decision was made. And no decision has been made. I'll say it again and again and again. I said it 3 times in council this morning. Only council can make those decisions. The province has their own decision-making authority. The feds have their own decision-making authority. They put conditions on funding all the time. I deal with it all the time. They usually have the courtesy of telling us in advance, which is what happened in this case.
I have a question about the timetable, though, sir.
Oh my gosh.
Well, you have said that by June, council should have enough information to make a decision. Are we bidding or are we not? But later this month, council may have to decide, are we having a plebiscite?
Yeah, I know.
Which could kill it before even June.
Absolutely.
Well, but does that mean there'll be a decision made about whether to proceed with the bid without a full financial picture?
I think that would be a shame.
Thanks, everybody.
All right, cannabis.
The land use piece.
Yes.
What are the concerns AHS has, and why is it important we talk about setbacks for all these things? No, true. But what is it you're going to be looking for when it comes to the discussion of distancing these cannabis retailers from various things like daycares or schools?
Ultimately, I will listen very carefully in the public hearing. I think that we do need to have some requirements because I'm more concerned about clustering than anything else. You know, you don't want to have a whole bunch of these along one strip. And that's really the biggest thing I'm concerned about. In terms of the distance requirements between schools and so on, I have some sympathy for the argument that there should be a setback, but I also have some sympathy for the argument that if someone really wants to go, 150 meters is not going to dissuade them. You know, the width of Olympic Plaza is not going to make a big difference. What's really important, though, for me, is something that was raised a little bit in the public hearing, is that we have to have very strict enforcement within those stores about selling to minors. And it has to be very clear that if you're selling to the minors, then you are putting your license at risk. And I think that's really, really important. It's even more important to me than the distance setbacks.
And your thoughts on banning public use with the exception of medical marijuana users?
All right, so we'll talk about that later. Since that's not part of the public hearing, I can at least give you my opinion now. Fundamentally, we have 2 choices here, which is do you treat it like smoking or do you treat it like alcohol? And I think everyone agrees you shouldn't be able to smoke marijuana or cannabis indoors in a public place. Tick, right? You should not be able to smoke it in a place where children are present. Tick. So really, the only thing that is the difference between how we treat smoking and how we treat alcohol is can you smoke as you walk down the street and can you smoke in public parks? As far as I'm concerned, I'm not particularly interested in seeing a lot of usage on the street or in parks. I think there's secondhand smoke issues. I think there's public nuisance issues. I think there's littering issues. Every spring I go out and do a community cleanup, and all I see is cigarette butts. So I want to be careful about all of that. However, I think that there are two areas that council really needs to talk about. One is the issue of whether we should allow cannabis gardens, I hate that term, designated cannabis areas at events and festivals. And I think there's good arguments on both sides. If people are doing it anyway, you may as well concentrate it. However, does that then normalize the behavior? And is that something you want at the Calgary Folk Festival, which is full of children, for example? The second is there's a very serious issue around people who live in multifamily homes, particularly with shared ventilation. So if condo boards or apartment buildings or landlords are able to outlaw the smoking of cannabis in the home, and there is no public smoking, then you've said to a whole segment of society there is nowhere you can use a legal substance. I don't know the answer to that question, and so I'll have lots of questions about how we can reconcile that problem. But I think that's fundamentally the only problem I've got.
Thanks.